The ambush hit without warning. The mountains exploded with gunfire, dust rising like a storm as the mixed task group scrambled for cover. In the chaos, a quiet female soldier, someone most of the team barely noticed before, was struck by shrapnel across her ribs and shoulder. She didn't fall instantly. Instead, she pressed a hand against the wound, held her breath steady, and kept moving with the retreating unit until they finally reached the temporary medical tent. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with panic. Soldiers groaned, medics shouted, and adrenaline filled the air. But she didn't match the chaos around her. She walked in on her own, sat down without anyone's help, and waited silently, her breathing slow and steady. Her eyes fixed on a distant point as if she were meditating rather than bleeding. The SEAL medic known for being unshakable in the worst conditions noticed her immediately. He had treated every type of battlefield trauma, but he'd never seen someone this calm while actively bleeding. No trembling, no panic, not even a flinch when he cut open her vest and exposed the deep, bleeding shrapnel wounds beneath. He tried testing her reactions, pressing near the injury, asking questions, checking for signs of shock. But her responses were controlled, almost disciplined. She wasn't numb. She wasn't dissociating. She was in control. Completely. Around them, other soldiers whispered, exchanging confused glances. Some thought she was in denial. Others thought she didn't understand how serious her wounds were. But the medic saw something different, something deliberate. Her stillness wasn't normal. It wasn't accidental. It came from training. Training he didn't recognize. And that mystery, that calm confidence bleeding through pain, made him pause. She was no ordinary soldier. Not even close. As the SEAL medic began working on her injury, he expected the calm facade to crack. Shock always arrives late. He'd seen it too many times. But she didn't break, didn't wince, didn't gasp. Instead, she adjusted her breathing with precise rhythm, matching the pain waves as if she had practiced it 100 times before. When he asked her to lift her arm so he could clean the wound, she did it carefully, stabilizing her own ribs with a technique he recognized, something only elite operatives were taught to prevent internal strain. Regular infantry didn't know this. Even many medics didn't. Her silence wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone counting, analyzing, staying ahead of her body's reaction. The other soldiers inside the tent watched her with growing unease. A few whispered that she must be numb. Others said she must be in shock. But the medic knew better. Her pulse told him the truth. Her body was absolutely in shock, yet she was masking every sign of it with unnatural discipline. He pressed harder near the wound, intentionally testing her pain threshold. She didn't move. Her eyes didn't even flicker. Only her fingertips tightened slightly against the metal chair she sat on, barely noticeable unless someone was studying her closely. That was the moment the medic's instincts sharpened. Nobody hides pain this perfectly unless they've been trained to do so. And not just trained, conditioned. She spoke only when necessary, answering his questions with clean, clipped responses, each one steady and calm. No rambling, no panic, no trembling voice. Not even during the worst part of the treatment. Her behavior didn't match her uniform. Her discipline didn't match her rank. Something about her past wasn't adding up. And the medic knew the truth wasn't going to be small. The medic wrapped the final layer of gauze around her ribs. But something kept tugging at his attention. The moment the blood was cleared and the grime wiped away, faint patterns began to appear on her skin, thin, faded marks running across her torso and shoulder. Not the kind that come from a single explosion or a single mission. These were layered scars, old and new woven together, each with its own silent story. He'd seen scars like these only on special operators who had survived years of deployments. Bullet tracks, blade glances, deep surgical lines, damage that spoke of missions no one ever talked about, He paused, his gloves hovering above her skin. "These aren't from standard service," he said quietly. She didn't respond. She simply held his gaze steady, unblinking, almost challenging. There was a depth in her eyes he recognized immediately. The kind carried by people who had already lived through hell and learned to walk through it, without fear. Before he could question her further, the radio crackled from the far corner of the tent. A frantic call from command echoed through the static, looking for a specific operative, known only by a code name. A code he recognized from classified trauma briefings. Files reserved for missions where everything went wrong. Except for the impossible survivor, he listened quietly as the same code name repeated. His chest tightened. He looked back at her. She showed no surprise, no curiosity, only that same unshakable calm that had hit him then. The scars, the silence, the pain tolerance, the discipline, the timing of the call. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't luck. She wasn't who her uniform said she was. And whatever her true identity was, it was far above his clearance, far darker than any story he had ever heard. The moment the radio transmission faded, the medic's suspicion turned into certainty. He'd treated enough elite operators to know when someone was hiding skill, real, terrifying skill. And the woman sitting calmly before him was hiding more than a little. He stepped closer, lowered his voice, and closed the tent flap behind him. Outside, the camp buzzed with activity, but inside the tent, the world suddenly felt small and heavy. "I've seen soldiers hide fear," he said quietly. "I've seen warriors push through pain. But I've only seen calm like yours and people who faced death so many times they stopped counting." She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She just breathed slowly. In a rhythm only someone who had trained to regulate pain would know. He needed answers not out of curiosity, but out of concern. He had to know whose life he was holding together with stitches and gauze. "Who are you really?" he asked, voice steady but firm. At first, she remained silent. Then she exhaled and spoke, not with pride, not with drama, but with a quiet acceptance. "I was never regular infantry." Those words alone sent a chill through him. Before he could press further, the tent flaps snapped open. A group of SEAL officers rushed in, breathless, their expressions shifting from urgency to awe the moment they saw her sitting there. One of them stepped closer. Eyes wide, he leaned toward the medic and whispered a name, a code name, spoken only in classified halls and whispered in trauma briefings. "She's the ghost surgeon." The medic froze. He had heard the stories, an operative who stitched others up under fire, who survived missions that turned entire teams into memorials, who operated on the edge of death and never broke. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her calm, her silence, her scars. She wasn't hiding weakness. The medic had treated 1,000-yard stares before, but never one like hers. Now that her true identity was out, now that the SEAL officers had spoken the name, Ghost Surgeon, the entire tent shifted. Even the air felt different, but she didn't change. She simply sat there, upright, calm, breathing in that unbreakable rhythm. Her hands resting on her knees like she'd practiced this posture for years. The SEALs stood silently to the side, their faces a mix of awe and guilt because they had treated her like a regular wounded soldier. Awe because now they understood why she never broke. The medic lowered himself onto the small stool in front of her, eyes studying the composure she carried like armor. "I've heard about you," he said softly. "But the stories don't explain this." For the first time she looked down just a fraction, just enough for him to see the weight she carried. And then she spoke, her voice steady, unembellished, almost unnervingly honest. "Pain doesn't scare me." She let those words settle before continuing. "I spent years in units where screaming meant getting detected, where even breathing wrong meant someone else died, where you operate with a flashlight in your teeth while bullets stitch the walls around you." Her gaze drifted to the Tense canvas wall, as if memories flickered behind it, memories too heavy for ordinary soldiers to imagine. She described missions where she had to perform battlefield surgeries on herself because extraction was impossible. Moments where she had to ignore shattered ribs just to drag another operator out of collapsing buildings. Times when she had knelt in the mud, holding arteries closed with her bare fingers until air support arrived hours too late. Pain, to her, wasn't an enemy. It was a language she learned to speak before she ever held rank. Calm, she said quietly, isn't bravery. It's the only way to survive when survival isn't guaranteed. The medic felt every word. The SEAL officers looked at her not like a mystery anymore, but like someone carved from the battlefield itself. When the evacuation team arrived, she stood up without needing help. Her movements were slow, controlled, deliberate, proof that she wasn't ignoring the pain. She was mastering it. As she stepped out into the fading sunlight, the entire camp watched her with a respect that didn't need words. She wasn't just the calmest wounded soldier they had ever seen. She was the reason warriors knew pain could be defeated not by strength, but by discipline forged in absolute darkness. A legend not written in medals, but in scars she never spoke of.